lonesome road set my soul on fire. Thinking back before I left, the passions I desire. Can you help me anymore? Live my life.
I know I tell you this every episode. I hate to turn that song down.
We'll have to have an episode where we just play the whole song.
Play the whole song. Jorma, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
Here we are, episode 5, Roads and Roads podcast.
Episode 5, how did we get there?
Little by little. But anyhow, good to be here with you.
Good to be here with you as well.
We always got so much to talk about. You know, we're going to talk today about a couple LPs that favorite of yours from back in the day, and I tell you favorites of mine as well, Jorma. But before we jump in that today, I just wanted to talk to you about something that my brother brought to my attention to me. Yes, I had to fact check it, believe me. But anyhow, my brother brought this to my attention, and what it is, Jorma, is Rolling Stone magazine did their top 100 protest songs.
Ooh.
A list. This came out in January 27th of 2025, so a fairly recent list they put together.
What do we got?
And it's really interesting to look at, because, you know, as I went through this list and talking to you about it as well, you know, you feel like, you know, the difference in time where these things all fit in. And I guess someone that listened to the 50s stuff, Pete Seeger and Woody, and that would be the protest songs.
Sure.
For me, I guess I always thought protest songs, the 60s was such a protest time for music.
Right.
But when I looked through this list, and of course, when you reminded me that it was 2025 and that time marches on, you see that other areas of protest music come in. But looking at this top 10 list, Jorma, number 10 was the NWA, and let me check with the producer because are you allowed to swear on this show? No swear. Okay. Well, Freak the Police is the song.
Good. Nice.
Number 9 was CSNY Ohio. That sure is a
okay.
protest song. Number 8 was Pete Seeger's We Shall Overcome. That's strong material there. Number 7 was Nina Simone's Mississippi Goddamn, which is just a killer song. And Bob Dylan's Masters of War came in at number 6. James Brown's Say It Loud, Say It Proud. That come in there at number 5. This was an interesting one. Aretha, Respect, came in at number 4. And I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. Let me go through the list first. Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit came in at number 3.
Of course.
And you know, someone, when I was talking about this list, they told me that Nina Simone wrote that Mississippi Goddamn on thinking about the Billie Holiday song.
Right.
And I thought, that does kind of make a little bit of a sense. I can follow. Number 2, one of Vanessa's favorite bands, Public Enemy, Fight the Power. Yeah. And number 1, Sam Cooke's Change Is Gonna Come. What a great song that is.
Yeah.
But as I was talking to you about this, and I said, you know, it's funny for me to see like NWA, All Respect, and Public Enemy in there, but it is, like you told me, I had to, you know, it's a cultural thing. You got to realize it's just not all about 60s groups and stuff.
Right.
And Jorma, the thing about Aretha Franklin, Respect, when I said to you, boy, I don't know if I think about that as a protest song, and go ahead and
yeah, I mean, if you think of the time when it came out, you know, for a woman to stand up front and demand the respect that she's entitled to, I mean, today it'd be like, thank you, Vanessa, another county heard from. I mean, today nobody would give that kind of thing a second thought, but in that time,
right,
certainly it was.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing you got to think about. Is, you know, that was a big deal for her to stand up and talk like that.
Absolutely. And the other thing, you know, you're talking about Pete Seeger and some of those guys. Don't forget that the Weavers were doing protest songs in the 40s.
That's right, Jorma.
You know, and I think also, you know, you're driving this bus, so I'm along for the ride with wherever you go. But if you look at what's considered we're looking back in time. You
Right.
know, if you think about the time when things came out, one wonders, did they think about this as a protest song? I think in the case of Pete Seeger, absolutely.
Yes,
There's no
and of
question
course, it
about
became
it.
an anthem of a protest.
Yeah,
song.
absolutely.
Still to this day,
I mean,
really, you know, we
yeah.
shall overcome. Yeah, and with that in mind, it was interesting. Like when I was talking about the list, you know, you got some like Edwin Starr's "War." You know, what is it good for? Came in at like number 20, and you could see that as a blatantly like
Right.
protest song. And others are more like you said, like Aretha. It's a like groundbreaking for what she was
Totally,
doing.
yeah, absolutely.
And some of the other artists that, you know, maybe I kind of wondered about was like, say, like Heaven 17, Midnight Oil, and you know, groups that I just wasn't as familiar with.
Yeah, well, you're losing me on that one.
Yes,
no
I know.
disrespect.
No, I
intended.
know. But also, when I saw Helen Reddy on the list, I was kind of surprised by that. But then you had a comeback on that with.
Yeah, I mean, in that time, you know, how many female singers or female artists had a position of prominence like that, and were running that up the flagpole.
Right, and I think that was 1971, so she's
Yeah.
in it. So that kind of stuff's real interesting. Like I said, you know, you got Barry McGuire, Eve of Destruction. Some of the songs are very, you know, you would imagine would be in there. And another interesting thing, aside from some like, say, the rap groups that were in there, punk bands were really, you know, a big part of the list as well. Crass, which was, you know, definitely, you know, on the underground of even the punk movement.
Right.
You know, Sex Pistols, then the Clash come up, the Dead Kennedys. And of course, those were big punk bands, so I could see them making the list.
Yep.
But one thing, Jorma, I wanted to talk to you about is, where is the Jefferson Airplane on that list?
Yeah,
Wait, I want to get in the mood for this, okay?
Okay.
Do you mind?
I don't mind.
Let me
at
see if
all.
I can bring in Radio Dream,
Let's see if
Streamland
it
Radio,
works. Let's
and
see if
if
you can do it.
See if I got it here coming in.
Look what's happening up the streets, got a revolution. Hey, I'm dancing down the street, got a revolution. I need a raising on the people I meet, got a revolution. One generation got old, one generation got soul. This generation got no destination to hold. Pick up your pride, and now it's time for you and me.
Now, in my humble opinion, Jorma, if that isn't a protest song or a
Yeah.
revolution song, I just can't figure it out. Now, I also want to point out, aside from Volunteers, you know, there's so many of the Jefferson Airplane songs that could fit into that category, in my opinion. I mean, Uncle Sam, which you played at Woodstock, I mean, that's a
Right,
protest song.
Snooks Eaglin song. Yeah.
We Can Be Together. And as I was talking to you, even Lather in a certain way is, you know, it's bucking the establishment.
Right. I mean, if
and-
you've actually listened to the lyrics of Lather,
Yes.
yeah, right,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. So anyhow, it's odd that we don't have any Jefferson Airplane on that list. To me, it seems to me like I don't want to be so strong as say a travesty, but an omission for sure. I think.
Yeah, well, I think this is the beauty and the eye of the beholder moment, you know. So whoever made up, I mean, you know, guys like me that have been in sort of like surfacing, you know, floating around on the surface of this business for a long time, you know, it's like if a magazine like Rolling Stones decides this is the 100 greatest guitar players or something, and you know, and somehow I managed to sneak in or something like that. Wow, you made one of the. And of course, we love that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's great. You know, somebody took notice, but the thing is, it's like, according to who and what does it
Right,
matter? You know,
right.
so,
Yep.
and I think a lot of this gets into in terms of the song and the art as manifested by different artists at any given time period too. You know, something that seemed urgent when the Jefferson Airplane, you know, was playing back in the '60s and very early '70s. You know, it's literally ancient history today, even though it might be more relevant than ever on some levels, you know.
Amen. Amen.
You know,
Yep.
and you know, the way things get parsed over the years too, if you think about the Jefferson Airplane performing in the category that you've laid on us today as protest songs, You know, by the time that some of these songs came out, the Jeffersons, we were a highly entitled band. We were making a lot of money. We were arguably in 1967. Wait a minute. When was Woodstock was 69?
Nine.
Yeah, the three
By that
big
point.
69, right?
Yeah.
By the time that rolled around, you know, the Doors, who we'll be talking to, I surmise later on today, and us, we were at the top of our game in the United States, and maybe even globally, briefly too. You know,
Right.
so if you think about, you know, artists like, let's talk about the Airplanes since I was in the band. You know, talking about quote unquote protest songs. You know, it's like, in a way, and it would be interesting if we had like Grace and Jack here to weigh in this also. But it's like viewing the world through the wrong end of a telescope, really. You know, because you know certainly we were not enduring hardships on any level whatsoever in that time period.
No, but at the same time, you were hooked in with the people that you could see what was going on.
Well, you're right, and interestingly enough, you know, especially for a band like the Airplane, coming out of San Francisco, where we did lots of stuff with the White Panther Party, with the Diggers,
Yeah.
Free Things in the Park, as did the Dead, as did Quicksilver, as did so
Right.
many San Francisco bands, where we were really connected to our generation in that time. Many of whom were living on the street at that time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if San Francisco wasn't an epicenter really for that at that time, I mean, when you mentioned Quicksilver, to me, there's a travesty that "What About Me" isn't put in there. To me, that's one of the
Yeah.
60s revolutionary songs, even though it came out in 70,
Yeah.
71. But
Right, agreed.
So
agreed.
you always do see those kind of things. But yeah, you guys were kind of it. Now, we're talking about the Airplane, Jorma. I guess, did you feel like you guys were like a revolutionary band? Like, I just want to say, from my looking at it, it seems like you guys were leading the
Right.
way.
So
You know,
this
you were
is
the
certainly a
soundtrack.
valid question, but it's important to point out. I mean, you know, you and I are friends and neighbors, so I'm a captive participant in what we're doing here because hey, we're here, you
Yes.
know. But in that time, I was not a vocal voice in the Airplane. My concerns, I mean, I certainly supported all the things that we all believed in that time, but I would be hard-pressed. I'd be interested if somebody could find any clip anywhere where you find me having a political discourse.
Right.
Where it would be difficult to find a clip of Marty, Grace, or Paul where they didn't have a political
Right,
discourse.
right. You were letting your guitar do the talking, you know.
Well, you know, I mean, that's easy to say after the fact, but the bottom line also is just as a young person trying to find his way in the world, I was so concerned in my art form with trying to find a niche for what it was that I was learning how to do, you
Right.
know. And I wasn't writing in those days either.
Right. Yeah, by the time you get to the Volunteers record, which has really a lot of strong protest.
Absolutely.
To it. I mean, it's a protest record.
I mean,
you know.
I mean, we can be together.
There you go.
Up against the walls, MFers.
Yes, it's like a '60s "We Shall Overcome." You
Totally,
know,
yeah.
as far as that goes,
Yeah.
there, you know. But yeah, so the whole Volunteers record and stuff. It's just, to me, it seems like yeah, you guys were, you know, really at the top of that.
Right. And also, you know, I mean, as you know, you're a little bit younger than I am, but I mean, that's what was going on in that time, especially in San Francisco.
Right. Now, when you heard Volunteers and that come, were there any other times you kind of thought you felt funny about any of the lyrics they were putting out there?
You know, honestly, I didn't, and you know, that's funny because in a band with a bunch of outspoken writers. And some of whom's band members were not writing at that time. It's like, you know, did you support this? Again, was any of this embarrassing? And the answer was no. We gave each other the freedom to be who we were, you know. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I didn't have much of a verbal voice in that time, but Paul, Marty, and Grace certainly did, and that's fine. That was part of the deal, you know. And the thing also is that in today's world, and again, I don't live in these lofty heights anymore, but one would imagine, you know, a set of circumstances where some artist might start a political rant at a concert and the audience might not like it. But back in those days, the audience was all about it.
The audience loved
You
it.
know, and it's like when people talked about Woodstock. I mean, what was the deal? The real deal with Woodstock, and to me, the real deal with Woodstock was the realization that there was an us and a them. Yeah, I'm not sure
Right. Yeah.
that's
No,
as
good.
obvious today.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Yeah, and I think you're right. Some of this stuff is in time, pale, that they don't see how
Right.
strong it was at the time. obviously.
Yeah.
And that just, I guess, happens anytime.
Maybe they have a new list next year. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. Well,
I mean, it's like We Can Be Together, which is such a pretty song, but there's some sharp teeth in that song.
oh yeah. I mean, it's an anthem.
Yeah.
Like there's so many on that Volunteer record. I mean, even just looking at the record itself, it was revolutionary.
Yikes.
Now, you remember two other groups
Uh-oh.
that were not on this list,
Were.
and two groups that we're going to talk about today, if we can get through it. And we may have to make this a longer episode as well. But two other groups.
I brought a sleeping bag. We can stay overnight.
Okay, we'll keep it going. We're just going to make sure our crew is all ready for that. Andie looks ready. But you remember two groups we were going to talk about because, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, two albums that you loved, and I also have a lot of respect for, being the Doors' first record and Cream's first record. But
Sure.
to see neither of those groups on that list, to me, is also an omission. Because, for instance, let's talk the Doors record here first. They had a militant type of the songs. Like I'm thinking of like Universal Soldier for one, 5 to 1. They got the guns, we got the numbers.
Yeah.
And Jim's lines in that. We want the world and we want it now, But in 1968, there's a lot of an anti-war sentiment, and Unknown Soldier actually was banned from radio because during that time, and so to me, that is another odd thing that didn't make it to that list. That some of the things on there, and like I say, not having the Jefferson Airplane on. I mean, there are things on there like you got Country Joe, Fixin' to Die, and there are a lot of great songs in that top 100. But like I say, that's under my skin a little bit that the Jefferson Airplane wasn't represented there.
Yeah.
Now
I was thinking about the Doors too. If you remember Paul Williams, the editor of Crawdaddy.
Yes.
He was a friend of mine, and when we were heading to go down to do Monterey, I ran into him at the hotel or something, I forget, before the show, and he went, Jorma, you're going to hear a band there that's going to blow your mind. They're like nothing you've ever heard before, and he was talking about the Doors. Now, it's hard to say that about anything these days. I think about that, like, when's the next big thing going to happen? And of course, my teenage daughter and my 20-something-year-old son will go, well, Dad, there's things happening all the time. Yeah, I understand that. But something that's just going to, like smack everybody in the face, who knows,
Right.
But anyhow, so yeah, first of all, it's hard to do anything weird these days. But to see a band, I know that the
At
Doors
that time.
recorded with a bass player, but Manzarek played that Fender Rhodes keyboard bass.
Right.
To see a band that rocked and had a bass sound but didn't have a bass player, it's like, how can this be? This is really cool.
Yep. Well, listen, before we talk about the record, I want to just talk.
I got sidetracked. Sorry.
No, that's what we're all about. That's what we are sidetracked. But one thing that happened with the Doors, with these songs and stuff in '68, anti-war sentiment and everything, they became, a subject of government oversight, you might say.
Yeah.
And to the point where it was almost intolerable to work,
Right.
Now, I just wondered, as far as Jefferson Airplane, because you guys also, and there's also a lot of rumor that you guys were on the J. Edgar Hoover's list, things like that.
I don't doubt that. I mean, I have nothing to physically be able to prove that that's true, but I have doubt that. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover and his ilk watched people that were a lot less visible than we were. I think they were afraid of anybody that had a massive audience, and in that time we had a massive audience.
Right. And I'm sure, just like we were talking with Jim Morrison, we want the world and we want it now. And she's up against the wall.
Yeah.
Everybody's right there with her.
Yeah.
You know, it's a powerful thing. With this being the case, Jorma, did you guys ever feel like for the Doors, it became a big pressure thing for the public performances? Some places they were banned from playing because of just their take on the anti-war, and even though they also may not have been like pushing it, it became, you know, they became one of those anti-establishment bands.
I mean, it certainly was. I mean, in our demography, whatever that demography was, that I think that certainly was a prevalent attitude, you know. And so a lot of things, you know, for us and the Doors and bands that had you know, we're not talking about political bands like the MC5 or something like that. That's what they were all about.
Right,
but it certainly was part of our world and stuff like that. And I think that in that era, it scared guys like J. Edgar and his buddies, you know, and maybe with some good reason too. I mean, you know, but the times were changing, you know, totally independent of all this kind of stuff. But there was a lot of synchronicity going on too. Does that make any sense?
It does, because there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
You're hitting it right there on the top. And let me ask you, so did it ever feel like, because I know you guys had a big group of followers aside from the musician,
Right.
Did you guys ever feel like, God, is that like a Secret Service guy over there watching us, or FBI guys? Did you ever feel like
you
had
know,
that kind
I
of
mean,
thing?
this is a lifetime ago, but the simple answer to this, I'm sure we did. I mean, and you know, with some good reason, I'm sure that we felt that we're being watched a lot, especially these great big shows. I find it difficult to imagine that J. Edgar would dispatch a team to the Fillmore, but who knows?
Who
Maybe
knows?
that could have been ground zero for him.
Yep.
But at you know, like when we got tear gas at the Rubber Bowl in Akron and stuff like that, I have no doubt that there were operatives there.
Operatives. Yep. Well, okay, let's just in and start talking about this Doors' first album.
Oh, boy.
The Doors debut LP, released January 4th, 1967. If you don't mind, to get us in the mood, let's crank up the old Emerson here.
Crank it up.
Bring in Radio Dream Streamland. Here we go. There it is.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, yeah. We chased our pleasures here, dug our treasures there, but can you still recall the time we cried? Break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side.
I hate to turn these songs down.
Now
you know.
you do. First of all, the Doors was an incredibly powerful groove band. You know, Jim could have been barking like a dog, and it still would have been a great song because of what the band was playing. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong, it is a great song, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
I mean, wow, what a great band to be able to sing over. What a groove band, yeah.
Yeah, there's that first album cover right here. Look at here.
I remember that well.
Now, Jorma, is this something you went and got at the store and had in your
Of
collection?
course, absolutely.
Yep.
You bet.
Yep.
See, because you and I remember how important it was to buy albums when they first came out.
I know when a hot tin of release was.
on some, you know, streaming service or
No.
something like that.
Nope.
You went to the records. Sometimes you might wait there hours before the store opened because you know they were going to sell out.
Yep. That's kind of the exciting thing about it, though, isn't
Yeah.
it? When you look back at that. So anyhow, Jorma, this record by the Doors was recorded at the Sunset Sound Recorders. And I wondered if you, I know we talked about that, San Francisco not having a lot of recording studios.
No, we worked at
until
RCA. I didn't
You
work
worked
at Sunset Sounds, yeah.
So anyhow, the Doors' first album recorded on 4 tracks.
Yeah, Shirley Pillow's 4-track.
Same kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I think we talked before. Takes Off was 3-track.
Yeah.
And Baxter's was 8-track, still no Dolby.
Yeah. And that was considered gigantic at the time,
Oh, yeah,
right?
it was like, whoa, 8-track. My daughter could probably record 100 track on her cell phone today.
Right, different things. The record, the Doors' first LP here, it has great cred as far as it's listed on so many lists as one of the greatest records of all time.
I totally agree.
And that goes from the BBC to even Rolling Stone. Much like your group, the Jefferson Airplane and Surrealistic Pillow, the Library of Congress also chose this record for the National
correct.
Recording Registry.
They did.
And it has hit multi-platinum status at this point. Of course, they all their records really did sell real well. I was a big Doors fan, and I still love the music, but it is funny. This first album is still one I jump to.
Sure. I mean, you're right. I totally agree. I mean, it's just a great album, and again, for me, we just never heard anything quite like that before. And the writing, awesome stuff.
You know, I know this is like going back probably, it's almost 60 years in your life, but when you talk about hearing something like that and having never heard anything like that before, I mean, sometimes I think about just things in my life, and you're right, I am a lot younger than you, but I think about the impact they had at that time, and I can feel like 20 again and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you kind of feel the excitement when you first heard that
absolutely.
and just thinking like, wow, this is like, and that's what you were talking about before, like when we were looking for another one of those moments, like, pow, you know? I don't know, it just seemed like there were more. I don't know if it's something being young that you get more pals.
Well, of course, because you have
Less to...
Yeah, you have less experiences to balance.
Right.
You know, to rank in the weightiness of their events, you know.
Yes. We're going to talk more about this record, but just to put it in perspective, this year, 1967, was really a great year for music.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I was looking down the list of releases and people's ratings of, you know, what they felt were the best records of 1967, I mean, within that year, you had the Stones release Between the Buttons, Flowers, and Satanic Majesty. And three albums coming out in a year's time.
Yeah.
You had Jefferson Airplane, Pillow, and Baxter's come out. Hendrix had R.U. and Axis both come out in the same year.
Yeah.
I mean, 67, right? Cream Disraeli Gears comes out. Who Sells Out? Dylan's John Wesley Harding. Big Brother's first album with Janis. The Columbia record comes out. James Brown, Cold Sweat. I mean, Velvet Underground and Nico. Country Joe, Electric Music for the Mind and Body. It's really...
An exciting time.
Buffalo Springfield comes. Beatles had Magical Mystery Tour and Sgt. Pepper in 1967.
Yeah, right.
In fact, talking about Sgt. Pepper, that Doors record we're talking about, that peaked at number 2. And the only thing in front of it was that Sgt. Pepper's, which stayed on the charts a lot in that year, 1967. Love's Forever Changes. There's a lot of great stuff. So obviously it's a very fertile time for the music to come out and you know, Jefferson Airplane, the Doors, the Beatles, the Stones. This is good company, you know.
Yeah, it was an exciting time. And the other thing too is, I mean, look, you know, just one man's opinion, but we're inundated with stuff today.
It's
true.
It's true.
And so just the way things were, the facts of life as a recording artist is that you couldn't really record unless you had a record deal. And we could talk about that for a whole session. To get a record deal required a lot of stuff, and sometimes it required compromises and all the kind of stuff, you know, that goes along with fighting with a label, and et cetera, and expectations, et cetera, et cetera. But today, you know, I mean, I have, as you know, now over the years, like back in the 90s, I had a home studio for a while. It's like having a boat or a horse. You know, the two best days, the day you get it and the day you get rid of it, you know.
They take a lot of upkeep, don't they?
Well, it takes a lot of upkeep. You need somebody to run it for you, and it's just not my thing. It is some people's thing. But in any case, wait a minute, I had this is hugely important. Oh yeah. So in a lot of ways, the cream surfaced to the top, and we'll talk about cream also.
Yeah.
The good stuff was actually made available commercially. And now anybody can, and again, I'm not critical of modern times. You know, I'm sure if my daughter wants to do her record, whatever the kids do with the record, that's great.
Yeah.
But it's not like getting a record deal and having it being nationally and internationally distributed, you know. And that's just not the way it is anymore.
Let me ask you, without jumping off the doors for too long, but exactly, I'm picking up on what you said there. Say someone back in the day thought they had a great song and stuff and couldn't get a label to put the record out. Would it be something as easy as it is today to go into a studio? And
First of all, most of the artists, you know, unless you were independently wealthy, wouldn't have the money to do that. The simple answer is no. Excuse me. The simple answer is no. We've never seen the light of day.
Yeah, because it's now, like you say, you go home with a computer and you.
Right.
I mean, I've heard people do things on their phone that are incredible quality. You know?
Yeah, and then and then you put it up on your YouTube channel and.
Right. So unless you had like a lot of money and you went to a studio,
you had to have a mechanism behind you, a machine behind you,
to get into the recording studio to do your thing.
And you know, operating, you know, on the platinum levels today, that's probably still true. Although every now and then somebody pops up, I forget his name, but there's a country singer that a really good writer, stupidly can't think of his name right now, that did all the stuff on his own and wound up having a hit with it.
Right.
As soon as the show's over, I'll remember it.
Yeah,
but
of course.
But that's very rare.
And you do hear things like that too, like where, you know, it's a name I don't know at all, and they say, oh, they got 3 million followers on their YouTube or their stream channel. And,
right. And again, you know, we joke about this from time to time. And we always say, yeah, I've got 1.5 million followers. If every one of those followers just sent me 50 cents,
yes,
how much? How could that hurt?
Let me add that up. That's
but yeah, I just, you know, again, it's such a different world. But you know, back in those days, to have a deal with a major, where you had distribution and all the stuff that went along with it.
Sure.
And there's there's negative shit that went along with that also, as we know. Wish I could remember that famous Hunter Thompson quote. You know the one I mean. We'll look it up sometime when the show's over. But anyway, yeah. And so for anything to see the light of day, you had to have a deal.
And you know, interesting on that too, because in Doors prehistory, of course, they got signed to Elektra was their big thing, and what was his name, Rothschild, or the producer that.
Right, Rothschild.
Rothschild, yeah. But they were talking that things like Columbia and Capitol were more desirable because they were the big dogs,
right.
You know. And but they were happy to find their own place and
right. And you know, I forget what Elektra was.
Elektra was out of Warner.
Yeah, it was out of Warner, and it was sort of like a more esoteric label.
Definitely.
Which worked out great for them in the long run.
Yep.
I mean, you know, Jefferson Airplane being with RCA, because we auditioned for Spectre and Capitol and all that stuff. I mean, a major label like that.
And RCA was a gigantic label.
Was a
as well,
gigantic
sure.
label,
Yeah.
correct.
Of course, their classical and
Right.
world was their big
Right.
thing then at that time too. Well, you know, the record did peak at #2, but they had one song that became a #1 hit called "Light My Fire."
Yeah.
And it was the success of this #1 hit that really propelled them to be all of a sudden becoming a gigantic band.
Absolutely. It's like somebody'd love a White Rabbit for the Airplane.
Yes. Yeah.
So we, the Doors and the Airplane were with the same agency back then, and both of us had hits on the charts at that time. And, you know, we were very fortunate, et cetera, et cetera. And so we wound up, you know, doing some gigs together.
Yeah, I'm going to talk to you about that.
I know you are.
I want to go in that
We'll have
direction
some fun with that, yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
But let's talk about this music here on the
Sure.
record here, Jorma. And again, like you say, one of those records you just get blown away by. I mean, it's song after song that's just really a great.
Yeah, and this
great
many
song.
years later,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes a song is anchored in time.
Yep.
And when you listen to it, it's like, yeah, that was great when I was 27, but
Yeah.
I don't get.
Yeah.
This is still
a
great album.
I hear the beginning of Break On Through. It still pops me every time I hear it. I mean,
Yeah.
as far as what a great order to put the records in, #1, and ending it, of course, with on the end of side 2, The End.
Yeah.
Which, you know, who ever heard a song like that before?
Yeah,
you know?
totally, yeah.
Let alone clocking in at 11:35 on the record here, you know.
Yeah, that required smoking a lot of pot and playing backgammon while you listen to it.
Well, it seemed to have worked pretty well. I'm going to have to get my backgammon set back out. But, Jorma, what made it so powerful to you here in this group?
Wow.
Like you said, no bass player. The instrumentation obviously is just killer. How they all
Right.
work so well together.
And they're great lyrics.
And they're great lyrics. Yeah.
And again, you know, it's nobody heard anything like it before. I certainly had.
The Doors, and as you said, you guys shared the same booking agent or management?
No, booking agent. Yeah.
So, do you remember who that was?
I want to say William Morris, but that's a guess because we were William Morris. Well, I really don't remember.
And do they have a lot of the same West Coast rock groups and stuff?
I really don't.
Hard to tell. Yeah.
We'd have to go down the rabbit hole for that one.
I know that in looking over my notes that you guys were both recording your second album at about the same time, and
Right.
The Doors being Strange Days, and you guys doing Surrealistic Pillow.
Yeah.
And they said that you guys would mix in the studio, or at least
You know,
back and forth.
gosh, I wish I could say, yeah, man. And I remember the time that
Yes. Well,
Jim came to me in the hallway and said, "Jorma, no."
You want to go play backgammon?
It's lost in antiquity, John.
Yes,
Lost
well,
in
Jorma, you do
antiquity.
such a killer job. I'm not kidding you, man. It always amazed me how a little spur of a question can bring on such a flood of memories.
You know, I amaze myself sometimes.
Yes, well, I hope so, man, because you amaze me. As you were starting to talk about your live shows, because you got the same agent
Sure,
and stuff.
yes.
As I started looking at that, there was, of course, and I'll get to the Europe '68 tour, 68, yeah. But when I started looking into things, there were a lot of shows where in their early days they opened for you guys, and some of the things that jog your memory was the Santa Monica Pier, the Aragon Ballroom.
Oh boy, the Aragon Ballroom.
And you guys, of course, are headlining these, and the doors are opening. The San Fernando Valley High School Gym.
Now we're talking the way it was meant to be.
Yeah, but another one that they mention is the Cheetah in L.A. You have any recollections of that?
Not really.
Now this is
I remember the only thing that comes to my mind, and this is a non-specific memory, is the Cheetah. In being in L.A. was the scene of grim debauchery.
Mm-hmm. I bet Jack knows all about
He
the
probably
Cheetah.
does.
Yeah.
He's good with that
Yeah,
stuff.
we'll have to ask him when we get him on the program.
Yeah.
But they said that the Doors were rising so much at this point, where you guys were really considered like, the giant American band, really.
At the moment,
so that opening spot was a real coveted thing that probably their manager and booking agent worked out, and management, and was able to do. But for them, they said one of their big things was in late August of '67, when they returned to the Cheetah, they got to be the headliner.
Right, and that was a big deal back in those days.
That was a big thing, huh? How that all went, yeah.
Agreed, yeah.
And so that big time for them that they're doing that, and I guess at that time, of course, those records kept coming out, one great one after another as well. So they just it's really a short-lived band, much that well, even like Jefferson Airplane isn't a long time band considered. A lot of the bands these days stay around for decades. Have a long thing going on, but. Let's talk about the Doors and the Jefferson Airplane Europe '68 tour.
Oh, the '68 tour.
And I'll ask you about some of the stories here, but one of the things is the Roundhouse in London.
Oh, the Roundhouse.
You seem to remember about that. Tell me about that room.
Well, the Roundhouse. Do you know what a roundhouse is?
Tell me.
It's a railroad thing.
Okay.
It's like it's first of all, it's a round house. Mm-hmm. So there's this round thing, and the tracks come in, and then there's a carousel thing with these tracks that look like a star. And I'm sorry. And so the train will go in there, and then the whole thing will turn the engine, and it will turn it around, and so you can turn around to get it to come back out again.
So this was like an abandoned roundhouse.
Well, yeah.
And they
weren't.
turned it into.
There were no trains in it anymore.
Yes,
let's put it
I
that
bet
way.
it had great acoustics.
I wish I could remember.
Anyhow,
But yeah, the Roundhouse. They're doing rock shows there. Yeah.
that is the tour, And
It is.
and I remember in our young days of friendship, I was a big Doors fan, and I was reading the Danny Sugarman book, No One Here Gets Out Alive, and they were talking about the time when Jim was handed a piece of hash from a fan.
Correct.
And he mentioned how he had taken it, and I remember asking you about that, if it was true, and you said yes, it was true. I was there, and it was a size of a golf ball.
Now, so what country was this in? Was this Denmark or Holland?
Could it be Amsterdam?
It was Amsterdam. It was in Amsterdam. Yeah. So Amsterdam, there was like Denmark had Christiania, that was their free city, and Amsterdam was, I guess, many drugs were legal, and even those that weren't were easy to come by. In any case, so we're walking down the street. When we'll have to revisit this when Jack comes out and visits at some point,
Okay.
because I believe that Jack had 23 pieces of luggage in this tour, but that's another discussion.
Even back then, he was doing that.
Oh, well, he needed his stuff.
Gotcha.
Man needed his stuff. Anyway, so walking down the street, and somebody came up to Jim and gave him a, it was like a golf ball size of hash. And being that it was there, it was probably like the really good stuff, you know. And he ate it. And the airplane, I believe we were opening for them that night at the whatever.
You were, because it looked like you changed nights.
We took turns, right?
Yeah.
And we were playing, and Marty was singing, and Jim came. I want to say dancing out on the stage, but it was probably more staggering. But let's say dancing because there was music. And, and I guess he was going to jump on the mic and help Marty with a song, and then he fell down. Then they had to call the EMTs. The concert stopped there for a bit, and I believe they took him to the hospital. And,
now, when he tries to come on the mic, you're obviously there. Are you guys looking, going, what the hell's going on, or something?
First of all, I'm not singing. I'm playing the guitar. And I remember, this is going to be interesting. I can hardly wait to see how this is going to play out.
Did Marty kind of like try to move him away from the mic, or?
I didn't have my glasses on.
Okay.
But I'm sure it shocked him as well.
Yes, well, the story says that he jumped up there, and like you said, he danced around a little bit, and then he just fell.
He did
on the side stage there.
No, he fell on the stage.
On the stage, yeah. And
they carted him off.
They said they talked to you guys to try to extend your set to see if they were going to be able to bring him around.
And we said sure.
And then it was interesting because I was rereading something. They had brought in a doctor, and he did the thing with the mirror, and he said he pronounced he was dead because he's not.
I don't know about that, but I can't say it surprises me.
Then they bring him to the hospital, and he comes back and all that kind of stuff there. But
can't keep a good man down.
No. But anyhow, yeah. So there's some truth to that story, huh? So
there's truth. So and then when the Doors went on, Ray sang Jim's parts.
Right.
And I remember, now again, this is a long time ago.
You know, it's almost 60 years.
I know, and that's a long time in anybody's book. But I remember that he sang like Jim.
Yeah. Yes, he did.
So if the audience was like really high, and it's possible, they may have all had a block of hash like that.
Yeah. Jim shape-shifted into Ray's.
Now, Jim was there, but he was sort of interdimensionally present. Anyway, the show must go on.
Jim Morrison, even all these years after his passing, and again, one of those sad stories within a year's time, losing Jimmy, Janice, and Jimmy and Jim, and I was talking with one of my friends about this in recent history about all the stuff he had to deal with because of the Miami supposedly exposing himself, which of course never was true.
It's not unlikely.
Well, the thing I like is John Densmore said we had 3,000 photographers taking pictures of him every single place he went. And if someone had a picture of him pulling down his zipper, don't you think they would have been showing it by now?
He's got a point.
And that is something to be said, especially in this day and age. You don't see it on even YouTube doesn't have the video.
What?
Well, at least they have our programs. That's a good thing, But anyhow. Yeah, so kind of crazy, but so we are going back a long time and stuff, but he really, for being gone so long, he still is such an iconic image. You see young kids wearing Jim Morrison t-shirts, As we said, the Doors' first record, still selling like it's being picked up on.
Right, I mean, and again, a lot of this has to do with the youthful time. I mean, Jim was like a heroic looking figure back in those days.
Mm-hmm. He had the way he dressed and everything.
The whole
deal. Things that, like you say, weren't common back then to see someone with snake skin and leather and all that kind of stuff,
Interesting.
Jorma, I just wanted your take on this because when you do read the bios that the other members of the Doors put out, and especially in Densmore's book, they talk about even in the early days when they met him, they thought he was nuts. He had definitely a crazy side of him, despite being this great creative wave of writing this poetry and long songs and all that kind of stuff. I mean, when you had contact with them and with him, I mean, do you guys think like, wow, this guy is really out there?
Well, not really, because this is going to be funny. First of all, he was a singer. I would have hung with the guitar players, But I have no doubt, and I don't want to, to be an armchair doctor diagnosing stuff. And I'm sure that I'm sure he had issues on some level, Mm-hmm. Who knows? But he certainly was. He certainly was. In addition to being an incredibly creative person, a very eccentric person also.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes they go together, don't they?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. Now, as far as you guys having some contact and shows and stuff, was there any kind of camaraderie, like you guys visiting each other's dressing rooms?
No, not that I remember. Yeah. Not that I remember.
And was that kind of typical, Jorma?
Yeah, I mean, back in those days, for myself, considering that I was still young in the game, I was all about getting ready to do the show, Mm-hmm. And socializing wasn't really like high on my agenda, and it wasn't because I was an antisocial person. It's just that I needed, what songs are we going to play? Is my guitar going to stay in tune? Yeah, stuff like that.
Yep.
Is there a flying insect going?
I think it's one of those stink bugs, and if I see it, I will catch them. We could.
Wait a sec. I need Bugs Bunny's Elmer Fudd shotgun.
Where is that?
Spring must be coming. The stink bugs are out.
Yeah, it must be warming up.
Yeah, don't squash it in here, okay?
No, I know. I tried never to squash them. I try to put them outside, but I did feel bad during those days when we had that 0-degree temperature. I put one outside, and then I went and he had died from freezing over, and I wonder if I should have just smashed him, instead of letting him suffer out in the frigid temperatures.
His little legs.
Maybe we'll talk about that on another
podcast,
time. Yeah.
That
a humane way to rid yourself of stink bugs.
Right.
Yes. What a powerful record. Now,
yeah.
I'm just wondering about our time frame here. So let me. Okay, we're going to jump to the next record then, and Jorma,
let's jump.
I mean, I want to give it. The Doors to me was just so much to talk about, but this is something we got to talk about too. And the main reason, you folks out there would know this, is Jorma and I talking when we listen to vinyl sometimes, and we talk about and this Fresh Cream. Jorma talking about me that getting knocked out by Cream and that first record, and also the Doors being a record that really knocked him out.
Yeah.
This is actually the UK import. It came out.
Of course it is.
The UK release came out on December 9th of 66, but they didn't release it in the United States until January of 67. So it's part of that whole group of 1967 records we were talking about.
Right.
Disraeli Gear is also coming out the same year.
Yeah.
But you know, what a powerhouse of a new record. And when we talk about revolutionary things, I definitely think you could look at some of Cream material, like Politician, for instance, and see a protest side of that. But the thing about Cream is, if their band format in itself wasn't revolutionary, you know, a three-piece powerhouse band, what I've heard said is that they spurred the bigger, louder sound of rock music.
I'd have to more than agree with that. So I remember Cream was playing in at the Fillmore. I had a second-story flat, shotgun flat above. Grace was living in Spencer at that time. We all lived. My ex and Grace and Spencer and I all lived in the same building, not in the same apartment. But anyway, so Cream was playing. Heard about Cream. Gonna go see the show. Dropped acid, of course. Went to the show. Actually, that's another story. Story for another time. Try to remember it. It's a good. No, I got to tell the story anyway. So, parked the car. I know you're not supposed to drive when you're high, but hey, you know, it was San Francisco.
You didn't know better back then.
I didn't know any better.
Okay.
Parked the car. Walking up the street on Geary to go to the Fillmore. Reasonably high, seeing things that probably weren't there. Well, one of the things that I saw that was there that terrified me was Buddy Miles. This large black gentleman came up to me to give me a big hug, and I was really scared there for a minute. But then I realized that I knew him and that we were friends, so it was okay.
That's okay. Well, he was a gigantic guy.
He was a big man. He was a big rest in peace. He was a big man.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so I went... And of course, I was tripping, so that had something to do with it. But Cream was Cream, and it was an awesome experience. And it was one of the first times that I've seen a power trio. I'm not sure. I'm sure there were some elsewhere, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah,
but
maybe.
But and they were playing through those double stacks of bars. I mean, the whole deal they had going on was monumental. You know, it's nothing like it. I mean, and the just that wall of sound. And I remember that I really dug it, John. I thought it was really cool.
Oh, I couldn't imagine you.
And I went back to my upscale hippie shotgun flat in Pacific Heights, and I looked at my Rickenbacker 12-string, and I said to myself, probably not these exact words, but what is this thing? And I took that guitar and threw it through the wall like a spear. I remember it sticking out of the wall. I'm sure the landlord wasn't pleased with that either. But
was it a Rickenbacker 12-string?
It was a Rickenbacker 12-string. It was
what
the
would
one
Roger
that I
McGuinn think about that?
Well, the good news is that I didn't break the darn thing.
All right.
And I was able to take it down to probably Sherman and Clay and trade it in on another Gibson ES 345.
Yeah, I'm glad you put it to some good use.
I did.
Jorma. Yeah, the tour you talk about is that at that time, and as I was discussing with you, interestingly enough, on the British album that came out at the end of '66, it has the great Spoonful, Willie Dixon song on here, which was one of their all-time classics. But it does not put on here I Feel Free, which had been released as a 45. It does show up on the U.S. recording where I Feel Free is there, but Spoonful is dropped. So that's kind of records, they did weird things sometimes, you know, with the British imprint and the U.S. by the time it got here. I mean,
they did it to get guys like you that are collectors. They
get
have
them
to
both.
buy it.
I have to have them. I have to have them all. Yeah, but that I Feel Free was you know, quite a big song, and at that time, of course, that made them very big. That this was the one you're talking about at the Fillmore. They had a 10-date run, and they said it was their first American tour, and they were well received because of that.
Yeah, it was an awesome show. I mean,
so
it was
Jorma,
awesome.
at that point,
It was
so you're already a touring musician, and Jefferson Airplane, big deal and stuff. But so something it said, oh, I've heard about this band Cream, and I better go see them.
Well, I'd already had the record.
Okay.
I actually think Owsley might have turned me on to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to go see him. And of course, I thought that when I saw them in person, of course, there were other factors impacting my perception. But I thought they were better live than I remembered that first record to be.
Mm-hmm.
Although when Disraeli Gears came out, I mean, that was like, I mean, I remember hearing them do Sunshine. They played Sunshine of Your Love on that concert tour, and I went,
on this first record, they're covering a lot of blues stuff. Is what we got from the traditional Cat Squirrel, which I noticed a lot of the British.
Who produced
blues bands.
that first record?
This first band, I was thinking it was Stigwood, but let me see here. See, this is back in the days when I don't even see a producer listed. Isn't that something?
Well, Disraeli Gears is Felix Pappalardi.
Yeah.
And Felix, I think.
He did a lot for that record. Yeah, Jorma, I don't see a producer on here,
Felix,
which is odd enough.
who produced, by the way, Hot Tuna's Double Dose.
That was Felix Pappalardi.
Yeah, it's Felix.
Yeah. So since you brought that up,
Felix and I actually talked about starting a band together, but then his wife Gail inconsiderately shot him, so that never happened.
How inconsiderate. Oh boy. Were we going to listen to maybe a little Cream? You all right?
Crank it.
I love the vocals on this.
I'm so glad, I'm glad.
Time is getting short.
I'm so glad, I'm glad.
How could he remember all those lyrics?
I know, huh? That put us in the mood, but there you go. And I know that guy that wrote that song is, again, one of your favorites.
Skip James.
Mr. Skip James. Yeah, they represented really the great bluesmen of the United States at this time on this album. Boy, it really is a riff that you know. And as soon as you hear that,
you know immediately what the deal is. Yeah.
You sure do. They cover Spoonful, Willie Dixon. The Cat Squirrel, as I said, kind of traditional. Robert Johnson's 4 Until Late, Rollin' and Tumblin', Muddy Waters. I'm So Glad, Skip James. Man, that's some great blues stuff. They carry, totally. And I imagine that's at a point being their first record and stuff where before Bruce and Brown started writing a lot of their own compositions, and Eric also becomes a writer and stuff like that. You have been talking about the tour thing and seeing them. I was reading another guy's account, and he said, going up and standing next to the stage, and you saw Eric Clapton in this red velvet suit. Same thing you were talking about with all the stacks of amplifiers, and just seeing some guy.
And the permed hair.
And just going off on the electric guitar at a high volume that, when you say he had never ever seen something, it was just like they were monumental.
Agreed.
Yeah. So what I wanted to ask you is, the Heavy Cream, as I say, revolutionary that they became a, blues rock, loud, almost a hard rock kind of thing. At the same time, they had a lot of intricacies in their songs. It wasn't just like a loud band.
These are three really sophisticated musicians.
Yeah. But bands like The Who, Led Zeppelin, even looking later day like a band like Black Sabbath, they said all these groups, that loud rock and roll really starts with the Cream.
Yeah.
But since you brought up Hot Tuna and Double Dose, you're in a trio setting there, pretty much. Yeah,
I mean, there's no question that Cream got me and Jack fired up. Because when we started with Hot Tuna after the Airplane in the beginning, we had Papa John, and Will Scarlett played with us there for a while, and but once we saw Cream, that really changed. That was a game changer for us. It was a game changer for us.
Did you feel like you patterned it after that kind of thing?
No, I wouldn't say pattern, because to me that implies like copying licks and stuff, and I'm not.
No, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean
no,
it
no,
in that way.
I know what you mean.
I'm more thinking like the Greek format.
But if you're thinking about the format, I don't think we consciously. Well, I just think it was just the next thing. They opened the door and showed us that the next thing the guys like us in that era needed to do was to play in a trio. Mm-hmm. And then Blue Cheer, and then all kinds of people.
Right. The Mountain guys were.
Yeah, the whole
along
gang,
same-
right.
it became
All of which required volume.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the volume is certainly a component to rock and roll, period, and especially in trio format kind of stuff. You need
Yes. Well,
you need horsepower.
Yep. Well, Double Dose had a lot of horsepower.
It did.
It sure did.
So Double Dose was, the building next door to the 1839 theater that I think that was the address of the theater that Graham owned that building, was the Jim Jones thing. Remember Jim Jones?
Oh yes, I was going to
Guyana?
join, but I heard the Kool-Aid was.
Yeah. So anyway, they we wouldn't have the expression "drink the Kool-Aid" if it wasn't for Jim. But anyway, so they had this megawatt shortwave thing. So he talked to his followers. And it was bleeding into the recordings. We had to ask the Church of Jim, or whatever they called it, to shut down the shortwave radio while we were recording.
Wow, I think that'd be so cool.
Drink the Kool-Aid.
It'd be like electronic music today. Jorma, the time flies by so
It does.
quickly when we get together and talk.
It does.
I do believe we're about ready to wrap up episode 5.
Well, all I can say is
we got to thank the beautiful people out there tuning in to hear the program today. Thank you so much. And
Indeed.
we thank our producer, your lovely wife.
Yay Vanessa and yay Andie.
Yeah, and we got Andie here at the
We do.
controls. Boy, that makes me
Right.
feel just safe knowing she's there. You
Yeah,
know?
she's got that filter on me. It makes me look I'm like 27, maybe 28.
You're not? Anyhow, thanks for tuning in. We've
Yeah.
got big plans coming up.
We do.
And we got some surprises coming for you. And we'll see you next time as we go down the road. Road and roads and roads.
Roads.
Walking down that lonesome road, set my soul on